If you're applying to law school this cycle, or you're even thinking about it, you're not just in a competitive cycle, you are possibly in the most competitive cycle we've seen in years. Applicant numbers are way up. LSAT scores are also way up. And so stress levels are naturally off the charts. This is not the year to wing it. You can't just crank out a personal statement the night before the deadline, hit submit, and hope for the best. So if you're still thinking, I'll take the LSAT, write a few essays, and see what happens, that doesn't work anymore. My name is Steve Schwartz. I've been helping students get into top law schools since 2005, and I've seen every kinds of admissions cycle: recession, pandemic, pre and post logic games removal. But this one is different. Let's break down what's actually happening and, more importantly, what you can do about it. If you're applying to law school right now, you need to know what you're walking into, because this isn't just any year. This isn't one of those, apply and see what happens kind of years. This is full on, gloves off, sharpen your personal statement, clean up your resume, do not mess around territory. Let's start with the basics. Last cycle, there were just over 64,000 applicants to law school. Pretty standard. But this cycle, over 76,000 applicants. That is nearly a 20% jump in a single year. That's not just some cute little uptick. That is a tidal wave of new applicants all trying to squeeze into the same number of seats. Think about what that actually means. Law schools didn't suddenly build more classrooms. They didn't go, oh wow, let's look at all this interest. Let's expand the 1L class by 30% and give everybody scholarships. Nope, the number of seats is pretty much fixed. So when you see a nearly 20% spike in applicants, what you're really seeing is a bloodbath of sorts in slow motion. And it doesn't stop there. Let's talk total applications, because it's not just more people applying, it's that each person is applying to more schools. Last year, law schools received 426,000 applications in total. This year, 522,000. That's a 22.5% increase in applications. In other words, people aren't just tossing out a couple apps and hoping for the best. They're carpet bombing the entire US News top 50. And yeah, I get it. It makes sense. Everyone's trying to keep their options open. But for you, the applicant, it means one thing. Every school you apply to is getting buried in a stack of applications taller than a con law textbook. Let's make this real. Imagine you're applying to a school like Georgetown or UCLA. In 2023, maybe they got 8,000 applications. In 2025, they're pushing 10,000 or more. And admissions has the same number of workers, same number of hours in the day, same number of seats. So now you're in a pile of 10,000 files and they're reading fast. You get maybe 2 minutes of attention per application, if that. And that's if you submitted early. This is why I keep telling students every word in your application has to pull its weight. Every sentence, every paragraph, every optional essay, even the spacing on your resume. All of it matters more in a cycle like this. When we work with students on their applications, one of the first things we do is help them trim the fat from their apps, take out all the fluff and focus only on what's going to stand out. Because in this kind of cycle, the difference between admit with scholarship and waitlist and forgotten can literally come down to one paragraph. Now, if all of this sounds stressful, that's because it kind of is. But there's power in knowing the truth. This is not about scaring you, it's about making sure you're actually prepared. Because if you walk into this cycle thinking it's business as usual, you will get eaten alive. But if you walk in with a plan, one that's specific to this year's trends, this year's numbers, this year's LSAT format, you can absolutely rise to the top. All right, that's the reality check. Deep breath. We're just getting started. Let's move on to LSAT scores because yes, that part got more competitive too. So let's look at the numbers. In 2024, 5,429 people scored 170 or above on the LSAT. That's already pretty impressive, right? But in 2025, 7,413 people broke the 170 mark. That's an increase of nearly 2,000 high scorers in a single year. This is not a minor bump. That's like an entire Ivy League worth of top scorers suddenly showing up to play. So what does that mean for you? Let's say you're applying to Columbia, Michigan, or Northwestern. In the past, maybe a 168 could have put you in the running, maybe even get you a scholarship. Now, you might be one of hundreds of applicants with that exact same score, all applying to the same schools at the same time. It's like showing up to a nightclub wearing the exact same outfit as everybody else, except instead of who wore it better, it's who explained their passion for public interest more authentically in 500 words. And let's be clear, this doesn't mean you're doomed if you're not scoring 175. But it does mean this. Whatever LSAT score you thought was good enough 2 years ago might not cut it this year. That's the new game. A 170 today is not what a 170 meant 5 years ago. You're not just being measured by your score, you're being measured against a bigger, stronger pool of test takers. And by the way, this is especially important for people who fall into what I call the just missed it zone. Like you score 164 or 165 and think, I'm close enough. I'll apply now and maybe it'll work out. I get it. It's tempting. You're tired. You've been studying for months and you want to be done with this already. But in a cycle like this, close enough gets you waitlisted. And being waitlisted in 2025, that's like purgatory. You don't get in, but you don't get rejected either. You just sit there refreshing your email for months, waiting till the last minute. And that's why when we work with students, we always emphasize don't settle early. If you're sitting at a 166 and your top school's median's a 170, go get that 4 extra points. I don't care if it takes 2 more months of prep. That trade-off is worth tens of thousands of dollars in scholarship money and possibly a spot at a school that changes your whole career. You are not just trying to get a good score, you're trying to get a score that's good in this year's context. And this year, the bar is higher, the pool is deeper, and the clock is ticking. Now let's take a quick detour before we get to the strategy. Because before we talk about what to do, we've got to get something out of the way. The common mistakes. These are the things I see students do every single year, especially in tough cycles like this one that quietly tank their chances. And the worst part is these are smart, motivated people, but they fall into these traps because they're following outdated advice, Reddit rabbit holes, or some TikTok influencer who took the LSAT once in 2019 and decided they're a guru now. So let's set the record straight. The biggest mistake is applying to 20 schools or more with no strategy. Yeah, I know you saw the advice somewhere to apply broadly, but let me ask you, broadly based on what? Most people interpret apply broadly as spray and pray. No research, no thought, just copy paste your personal statement and toss it at 20 different law schools like darts at a board. But this isn't online shopping. You don't just add to cart and hope one of them fits. Each law school is different. They care about different things. They offer different kinds of aid. And they have wildly different student cultures. So if you're not tailoring your application, especially your essays, you're wasting both time and money. And don't even get me started on why our school essays that clearly could have been written for any school. So when we coach students on the applications, we don't just say cast a wide net. We help them build a targeted list of schools based on LSAT medians, personal fit, and scholarship potential. That's how you apply broadly but intentionally. Otherwise, you're just giving LSAC more money for the privilege of getting ignored. The second big mistake is obsessing over logic games. My friend, they're gone. I know you bought the index cards, you downloaded the templates, and you got really into grouping rules, but logic games is off the test. Kaput. Retired. The current format is 2 logical reasoning sections, 1 reading comp section in terms of the scored portions. That's it. 3 scored sections, all verbal in nature. So if you're using outdated textbooks, hand-me-downs from a friend, and you're crying over conditional chains, you're wasting precious time on content that isn't even part of the test. Step away from the games. The LSAT has moved on, and so should you. The third big mistake is waiting till the last minute to submit. And this one is brutal and so common. People spend months perfecting their LSAT prep. They obsess over every single question. But when it comes to actually submitting their application, they ghost their own future. They wait till January or even February to get everything in. But the problem is, rolling admissions is real. That means schools don't wait till the deadline to start looking at applications. They start reading them as soon as they open. I mean, think about it. In September, there are hundreds of seats available. In January, there's scraps. In February, you're fighting over the last open seat with someone who got a 180 and somehow wrangled an internship at the Supreme Court. So I don't care how good your LSAT is or how polished your essays are, applying late puts you in a weaker position every single time. I tell students this all the time. If you submit on day one with a 165, you might be competing against 160s. But if you wait till January with a 165, you're now competing against 173s who already scooped up the big scholarships. So let's make a pact right now. No procrastination applications. If you're watching this and nodding, yeah, I'll get to it, you won't. So do it now. No prep, no hacks, just sit down and take the test under timed conditions. And yeah, it might hurt. You might get a 151 and think, wait, I thought I was smart. You are smart, but that number is not a final grade. It's just a starting line. And if you don't know your starting line, you can't build a plan that works. I've had students come to me saying, I'm aiming for a 170. And when I ask what they got in their diagnostic, they're like, I haven't taken one yet. That's like saying you're training for a marathon, but you won't even run around the block. You've got to know three things up front. First, what is your baseline score? Second, which sections are killing you? And third, how far are you from your goal and how long will it realistically take to get there? That's it. That is your foundation. Now, here's what usually happens. If you're scoring in the 150s or below, great. You've got plenty of room to improve. That also means you'll probably need at least 3 to 6 months of consistent, focused prep. If you are already in the 160s, you're close, but don't get cocky. The higher your score, the harder each extra point becomes. Getting from a 165 to 170 is way harder than going from a 145 to a 150. And by the way, this is exactly what we do with our students. The first thing we do is get that diagnostic done under real test conditions. Not a fake test, not a half section, a full exam. Because once you know the truth, you can stop guessing. And when you stop guessing, everything else gets easier. You don't waste time drilling questions you're already good at. You don't stress over whether your score is good enough. You don't overcommit or underprepare. You get a real plan based on real data. And that's the mindset shift here. It's not about ego, it's about clarity. If you're starting at a 153 and you want a 170, that's not embarrassing. That's just a plan that needs time. But if you're starting at 153 and telling yourself you can hit a 170 in 2 weeks while working full-time and watching Netflix every night, we need to have a little chat. So know where you are, own it, and then make a plan based on that reality, not some fantasy. And I'm going to show you exactly how to build that plan in a few minutes. But first, let's talk about what's actually on the LSAT now that logic games are gone and what that means for your prep moving forward. As I said, logic games are off the test. No more grouping, no more sequencing, no more feeling like you're trying to solve a Sudoku puzzle while a timer slowly crushes your soul. And I know that some of you are genuinely sad about this. For most people, though, this is a relief. The LSAT now has 3 scored sections, 2 scored logical reasoning sections, 1 scored reading comp, and 1 unscored extra section of either reasoning or reading comp. That means the entire test is now focused on one thing. How well can you read, think, and argue under pressure? This is important because the game has changed. If you're still spending hours trying to master logic games in 2025, you're basically practicing for a race that doesn't exist anymore. So let's talk about what does count and how to prep for it. Logical reasoning is now 2/3 of your scored exam. And honestly, that makes sense. Logical reasoning tests real skills you'll use in law school and as a lawyer, spotting bad reasoning, evaluating arguments, identifying assumptions, and understanding subtle language differences that totally change meaning. So here's what to do. Start keeping a trap answer log. Every time you fall for a wrong answer, ask, why did I pick this? What made it tempting? And what made the right answer actually correct? Write it down. When we work with students, we have them build what I call a flaw journal. One student told me it felt like therapy because it forces you to actually understand your patterns, not just keep guessing and hoping things improve. After a few weeks of this, you'll start seeing patterns like, oh, I keep falling for answers that are too strong, or I keep mixing up correlation and causation. The good news is, once you know your traps, you stop falling for them. Now, let's talk about the section that gets no love but wrecks people's scores, reading comp. Most people approach this section like they're reading an article on Wikipedia. They just kinda read it. No structure, no game plan, just vibes. And then they wonder why they blank out 30 seconds into the questions. Reading comp is not about memorizing details. You don't get points for remembering the name of the 14th century French philosopher who believed poetry was a form of political resistance. Nobody cares. What you do get points for? Knowing the main point, understanding the structure, tracking tone and attitude, eliminating choices that distort or overreach. So here's how to train. Read aggressively. Like a lawyer, not a literature major. When you finish a passage, force yourself to summarize the main point in one sentence. Not 5, 1. Ask, what is the author's purpose? What's their point of view? How is the passage structured? Then, and this is key, predict the answer to each question before you read the choices. Why? Because LSAT answer choices are designed to manipulate you. They sound plausible. They use big words. They reward passivity. But if you already have a strong prediction in your head, you won't get swayed by fancy sounding nonsense. Let me show you how to stop wasting time. Because here's the truth. Not all LSAT questions are created equal. Some come up more often. Some are more likely to trip you up. And some you're already good at, so drilling them isn't doing anything for your score. Enter the 80-20 rule. You've probably heard it before. 80% of your results come from 20% of your efforts. But here's how it applies to LSAT prep. 80% of your score gains will come from fixing the few question types that consistently destroy you. Not from drilling 300 questions at random, not from watching another 2-hour logical reasoning lesson just in case. So let's make this real. First step is to ID the score leaking questions. These are the question types that cost you the most points. Let's say you track your performance and realize you're crushing flaw and necessary assumption, but you're missing 3/4 of parallel reasoning questions and you haven't gotten a strengthening question right all week. That is gold, because now you can say, this one category is where most of my points are leaking. If I fix just that, my score jumps. Every student we work with does this. One of our students, we'll call him Jake, was stuck in the mid-160s. Brilliant guy, great writing skills, but he kept tanking his logical reasoning score. When we audited his performance, it turned out inference and parallel flaw were destroying him. He wasn't bad at logical reasoning, he was just bad at those two types. Once we fixed those, he hit 173 within weeks. Now, full disclosure, your results may vary. Nothing is guaranteed, but I share his story to show you what is possible when you analyze your data and adjust your approach accordingly. Now, here's what most students do. They'll say, oh, I'm bad at parallel questions. Let me avoid those and keep doing main point questions instead. That's like being bad at math and then solving 100 English questions hoping your SAT score will go up. Lean into your weaknesses. If you're missing parallel questions, you should be living and breathing parallel questions for the next 2 weeks. Same goes for reading comp. If you are getting destroyed by author's attitude or passage organization, stop rereading the whole passage and hoping something clicks. Start tracking the tone. Make a list of phrases that signal attitude and build pattern recognition. Use the same approach with logical reasoning. Strengthen and weaken, master common argument patterns. Necessary assumption, watch out for extreme language and new terms in the choices. Principal questions, reframe them like match the flaw or strengthen questions. Finally, measure what matters. You should know your accuracy by question type and by section, not just your overall score. Track it every week. Nothing fancy here. Google Sheets works just fine. When we work with students, we build out a simple tracker. Question type, right or wrong, notes, and takeaways. Over time, you start seeing patterns, and those patterns are your roadmap to higher scores. It's like having a GPS for your LSAT prep instead of wandering around hoping you'll eventually find a shortcut. Now let's talk about one of the biggest LSAT adjacent mistakes I see every year, waiting too long to apply. You could write the best personal statement ever. You could score a 177, and you could have glowing rec letters from famous judges, but if you apply in January, you're playing the game on hard mode. Here's what most people don't realize. Law school admissions is rolling. That means schools start reading applications the moment they open in the fall, and seats start getting filled immediately. Scholarships start getting handed out early. So if you apply in September or October, you're going to be one of the first people they see, and you're completing for a class where the seats are wide open. You're like a first round draft pick. But if you wait till January, you're walking into a room where 3/4 of the seats are already taken and the biggest scholarships are already gone. The application readers are tired, they're buried in files, and they're dreaming of vacation. So you could be just as qualified as someone who applies in September and still lose out simply because you showed up late. It's like showing up to a Black Friday sale at 3 p.m. and wondering why the TV you wanted is gone. Timing matters. So let's say you're taking the LSAT in August or September. That means you could apply in October at the latest. No reason to apply later than that. So ideally, you want to hit submit the same week your score comes back. And you should. So everything else needs to be lined up before your score drops. Your personal statement should be drafted, revised, and edited before your score comes out. And if you're thinking, but Steve, I don't know what schools I'm going to apply to yet. Doesn't matter. Your core personal statement doesn't really change regardless of the prompt. You're just customizing small parts of it later. So draft it now, edit it now, and finalize it now. Now, your letters of rec should already have been requested. Yes, your professors and supervisors are busy, and yes, they're going to wait till the last minute. That's why you don't wait to ask. Send them a clear, polite request, give them a deadline, and offer them a bullet point list of talking points. Make it easy for them to say yes. And your resume should be tight, clean, and updated. And this is not your undergrad resume with your clubs and your hobbies. This is your law school resume. 1 page, no fluff. Think accomplishments, not responsibilities. Now, when we coach students through this process, we treat the application timeline just like we treat LSAT strategy. We don't just say, write your essay. We build a backwards plan. We work backwards from your score release date, back to your submission deadline, back to your editing schedule, and back to your drafting window. Because we've seen what happens when students get lazy on timing. They miss scholarship deadlines. They get waitlisted at schools where they should have been accepted. They spend months wondering why they didn't get in. And you don't need that. So if your LSAT score comes out late September, you should be ready to hit submit a day or two later at the most. That means all your materials, essay, resume, rec letters, they all need to be locked in before that. If you do this, you're ahead of 80% of applicants right off the bat. Now let's step back for a moment and look at the big picture. If you've been watching up to this point, your brain might be screaming, oh my God, the numbers are up, the scores are up, the seats are disappearing, I'm doomed. You're not though. Yes, this cycle is intense, and yes, it's more competitive than last year. And yes, law schools will be pickier. But that doesn't mean you're out of the game. It just means you have to play smarter. This is not a year where you get to be casual. You can't kinda study for the LSAT. You can't sorta work on your essays. You can't hope your recommender gets back to you sometime next month. You need to move with intention. You need to stop thinking like an undergrad and start thinking like a strategist. Because the truth is, and I've seen this over and over again, the people who win in cycles like this are not the ones who start off the smartest. They're the ones who know where they stand. They build a real plan. They follow through when it stops being fun. They ask for help when they get stuck. And they stay consistent when everyone else gives up. And I say this from experience. When we work with students, especially the ones who start off overwhelmed or behind, they're not trying to be perfect. They're just trying to do the next right thing, 1 rep at a time. You don't need to go from a 153 to a 175 overnight. You just need to show up today and work on the part of the test that's costing you the most points. Then do it again tomorrow. Then do it again the next day. That's how it happens. Most people won't even watch a video like this. They'll skim a Reddit thread, feel vaguely guilty for not studying, then go back to Suits for inspiration. Which is fine, by the way. Just maybe don't take your LSAT strategy from Harvey Specter. But you You're actually doing the work. And that's the difference between hoping you get into law school and knowing you gave yourself the best shot. So no, you don't have to be perfect. You don't need a 4.0 GPA. You don't need a 179 or 180 LSAT. You just need to be focused, strategic, and consistent. That's what gets you in, and that's what wins scholarships. And that changes the trajectory of your career.